Hello and welcome to the Weshtern Philosophy Podcast. Two friends with oceans and oceans discussing the unseen forces in our lives through the lens of music, mystery and crack. For this, our second episode, we talk about boundaries. I was like, it was nice to witness that whole arc.
Yeah.
I saw the awkward moment.
Yeah.
I saw the that we were saying, don't worry about it.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
easy to get in your head. And then it was resolved. And then even the day after, he's like, yeah, so the lesson is really brought home to you. I really wanted you to fuck off. Right, good morning, Mr. O'Connor.
Good morning, Bartalicious. How are we doing?
Oh, yes.
How are we doing? Just trying to put you in a good mood straight off the bat.
Well, it worked.
Okay.
Flattery is, it always works.
Quiet, I'm taking notes.
Yeah, this is great timing. Hit record, take out the pens, silent scribbling.
Yeah, that's it. Well, we're here. Tommy Dunshaw in the wooden cabin. To borrow a line from Barry Mullins. I don't know if you ever listened to his radio show, but he's like,
No.
what's it? The sun is warm, the coffee is cold the whole time. So I'm gonna nick Barry's line here, which is the cabin is cozy, the coffee is warm, the dog is snoring,
And it just stopped lashing.
and it just stopped lashing rain. And recording in a wooden cabin, that means it's time to start. Start doing audio.
The audio. I was doing a theatre performance last November, and it was in a town or in a community hall. Just like all these places are like made of like metal corrugated iron sheets, and then it starts raining, and you go, "Oh no, there is no way anyone is going to hear anyone except for me."
And
of course.
is this when you learn to like project your voice
This
like
is exactly.
like a siren?
I spoke like this before, and then I got the boomy voice.
An Irish accent for some reason, very interesting.
But all children talk like that.
Mm-hmm.
But they said to me like, just do Ian Paisley. So that's what we're trying to do right now. Oh,
Is
this
that
gonna
right?
be no. But like just for the projection, I can't do the
he
accent.
could certainly project
I
his
can't do the
voice.
accent.
Say what you like about Paisley, that voice, regardless of the content, it travelled.
Oh no, for me it was the opposite. I love no joking. But right, you had a good topic. You're the topic machine lately, and the topic was boundaries. Now I instantly had a fair few ideas. Are you still writing? I see you've only put the title on the top.
I've written the word boundaries. I've underlined it 3 times, and I've gone over the B twice.
Yeah,
so I'm good to go.
Maybe write down talk about it. Yeah, that's
Talk
good.
about.
Talk about boundaries. Something to talk about.
Oh no, I've written talk around boundaries. So okay, yeah. Look, we'll get there. We'll see how long we can string out our rapidly dwindling listenership before we get to the topic. Yeah,
exactly. But that's definitely something I had a lot of thoughts on. That's setting me up for failure. But I had some thoughts about it. But actually, because of that, I wanted to ask what it meant for you. I know I'm putting you on the spot slightly, but I think it's better. Am I too close to the microphone?
No, you're good. Hold on,
Okay.
we're just going to do a quick. Yeah, I think we're all good.
You can leave that stuff in. Don't edit that out.
Yeah, test 1 2.
Test 1 2.
Great. Sorry, I just got a feedback warning. So Bart, you were talking about throwing me under a bus of some description.
Yes, it's a heavy lorry.
Mm-hmm.
No, I just wanted to actually hear from you a bit first because because boundaries is a nice term because it can mean a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And there was 2 big ones that came up for me straight away, and which I will write down now. Don't look at it.
I'm definitely going to steal your work.
Yeah. Okay. I've slid it behind the laptop. You can't see it. It's so brilliant, ladies and gentlemen. But so I wanted to hear a bit of your input on it actually first, what it means to you.
Yeah. Yeah, boundaries are an interesting one. I was talking to somebody about this yesterday in my other less important life as a practitioner. But we were talking about how there is this person was a little bit stressed. They were in a stressful situation at work, and one of the things that was causing the stress and the stress-related signs and symptoms in their body, was that the stress was not being released by speaking out. So people were putting them under pressure, and instead of, somebody was like, oh, they'll do this. And instead of them speaking up and going, no, I actually won't, that's your job, they ended up doing something they didn't want to do. And because that happens once, it happens again and again. Because people test your boundaries. Yeah. Like, that's one of the first things about boundaries, is that people test them. And when they find out you're not pushing back, they're like, oh, I can push this person this far, maybe this far, maybe this far, So we were talking about the idea of like asserting your boundary by speaking out. And we're talking about one of the reasons, and this person is a woman, and one of the reasons it's a bit more difficult for them is that can come across as angry sometimes, I think. I think as men, we are in general more expected to keep strong boundaries, and this air of aggression that can come up when it comes to asserting boundaries is not looked upon too negatively. I think sometimes it can be, when women do it, they can come across as sounding angry. And I think that healthy anger and expressing it, the combination of those two, is one way of defining a boundary. So basically somebody's pushing you and you're like, back off, You're actually not like, back off. I'm going to say what I actually wanted to say, which is like, you're like, fuck off.
Yeah, I don't think this is a PG podcast.
No, I don't think so. Yeah. And actually, on that note, and I don't know if I can name this person, but we were at a gig recently, and the person that was going on stage to perform, somebody I really love and admire very deeply.
Just for your own sake, do not name them. But
I went up to chat to them beforehand, and they were just a little bit cold and stuff. And then afterwards, they caught me, and they were like, "Oh my god, that was great!" And I was like, "Yeah, it was great." He's like, "I'm a bit different person before and after the gig, And I was talking to him the next day, and he's like, "Yeah, I just don't want to talk to anyone before the gig." And he's like, "Yeah, you're great and everything, but when you were talking to me before the gig, I was just like, fuck off. I just wanted you to fuck off." And said with all the love in the world, because that's what this person needed to give a great performance. He hadn't invited me over to chat. I impinged upon a boundary I didn't know was there, and he, through body language, told me to fuck off. And I'm like, fair enough.
I don't know if I would even call that a boundary, but it was funny as well, because like you, I worry so much about social interactions, if I've done the right thing or whatever. And even in that moment, you were very good.
I
think we managed it very well, because you said it, and then another friend said, yeah, it's probably just the performance. And then the first thing your man literally said to you after the performance was, I am different. And we were like, I was like, oh, it was nice to witness that whole arc. I saw the awkward moment. I saw the, we were saying, don't worry about it. It's easy to get in your head. And then it was resolved. And then even the day after, he's like, so the lesson is really brought home to you. I really wanted you to fuck off.
But one thing that makes me think that that's a healthy boundary is that, because I suppose we should define boundary and stuff, but I think it's very healthy because he expressed it really clearly.
Yeah.
Like, I will never make that mistake again. And hopefully nobody I've told that story to ever make that mistake again. Yeah. And it was done with complete love. But serious, like, there was weight behind it. Like, when I was talking to him before the show, I was like, I need to get out of here. Like, I'm in the wrong place. I need to just go away and sit down again. So when I'm talking about boundaries, that's something I'm interested in, is the role of, and I don't want to call it aggression or anger, because I don't think it is those things. I think force can be positive. Assertiveness, I suppose, is a word we could call it.
Oh man, this is so interesting, because I was actually just now, when you were doing your notes, I see he's put a few bullet points there, but pure doctor's handwriting, no one can read them. But at that same gig, I was really tired. I actually really enjoyed the gig. It was a great gig, and I've been listening to the music ever since. But I was really tired, and there was we were a bit late going up during the support act. Thank you. And another thing I need to talk about is I'm very insecure about my English, but that's a whole different topic. Right. Anyway, we'll talk about that some other time. But that's not to do with boundaries. But thought I'd better throw it up here. should have done that beforehand. Anyway, during the gig, there was we came in quite late, so we were sitting at the back, and then there was a couple of American lads who I'd seen in the pub below the venue, and they kind of came in. I think the energy was kind of like, oh, we'll see some of this Irish music, and then I think it probably wasn't really what they were looking for. You know, they were coming. This is the whole story I made in my head. Like coming to Ireland and looking for a bit of probably trad and whatever, and this was something else, you know. Yeah. But then there was also we were close to at the back. There's a door with to the smoking area and the toilets, and so people were kind of coming in and out, and everyone was being respectful of the music, so being quiet. But then some people were a bit loud outside and didn't realize they come in, and so someone just said, "Oh, guys, come on, be a bit quiet." Yeah. But then the American lads who were sitting there at the back, every time the door opened, they went, "Shh."
Is that what that was?
And I was really, I was actually, it didn't ruin the performance for me because I said to myself, you're very tired, just leave him at it. But then I had to go to the toilet, and I was like, if someone says shh to me, I might have to fight them
in half like a phone book.
But the reason, and then I said to myself, is it really worth fighting, Bart? Is it really, like, which is something I never do anyway. But the reason I'm telling that story is because while that was happening at a meta level, I was thinking about part of being able to set a boundary is being able to enact some consequences.
Yes.
And a great a mentor of mine, spiritual shaman-y dude that we call Shifu sometimes, which I think is that Chinese for wise person, or
it's Chinese for somebody who's very, very good at their job. It can be a kung fu teacher, but it could also be a taxi driver or a chef.
Or a craftsman. Yeah, okay. But he always said to me, you need to have a sword on your back, and I think that part of it is like, usually I've had to learn through my childhood to really set strong boundaries. And I think part of the reason that it works is because people have a sense that they might be enacted as well. Even though I never get into fights. And people might say, oh, that's because you're a very big man. But actually, the opposite of that is true. Because
you'll attract more of it.
Because I attract more of it. And when I was as big but hadn't learned these lessons yet, I got into loads of trouble over it. But now I've learned how you can set a boundary, let people feel that boundary. But it's interesting that that there might be some consequence. Now, I think fighting people is pointless, or nearly all of the time, unless you have to defend yourself or someone you love. But it is interesting that there has to be some weight behind the boundary. And I suppose when your man said to you, I wanted you to fuck off, there is a clear sense that if you don't fuck off in those, like, he made it the nice thing is that he made it very specific. So it's like, it's not that I don't like you. It's in that moment, please leave me alone.
Yes.
If a moment like that happens again, and he knows you're sensitive enough to that it won't happen again. But if you then come up to the next gig and you do it again, he would be angry with you, and you might damage the relationship. So
that's the transition from assertive to angry, or
and that is the weight probably behind his boundaries that and he put it really strongly, but he was kind in that he made it specific. So like, you're an arsehole, just like in that specific situation, leave me alone. I'm trying to channel the goddess or whatever he's doing, whatever people do during performances. But
there's two things there I find really interesting that you've said. One is the consequences, and this is something I was having the chat with my patient about. Because I was like, I think it's very important for that person to express themselves, right? Because that, so in Chinese medicine, the lungs, which are related to the skin and the metal element, are the boundary between your inner world and the outer world. Okay, so you think about the job of the lungs, they literally take the outer world in and they express the inner world out, both in terms of like respiration, in terms of that's how you communicate. How do you get the thoughts that are in your head into other people's heads? Through your lungs, through your breath, And then the skin obviously is the boundary of your physical body and where the universe starts. So that's a literal boundary, right? So that is like a physical, energetic boundary that is being impinged upon by the people around this person because they're not speaking up. they're not asserting their boundary. You can say energetically. I don't love that word, but And if you actually start to express that, your inner and outer worlds will change. But I'm more interested in the inner world. So this is something I always have to say, is that you expressing these things benefits you because it exercises your agency. It's like a pressure cooker. If you keep everything inside, you get wound up and angry and frustrated, and then it starts turning inwards and then all this stuff. And you let it out, and that's just better. Getting stuff from inside to outside is something we've talked about before. But I don't believe you can completely control the consequences of your actions.
Yeah.
Like if you speak up in a workplace environment like that, everything isn't necessarily magically going to get better. Could get quite a lot worse, Yeah. And that's where, even when you're in the right, you really have to accept the consequences of what you're expressing.
Yeah.
But I still think the difficulties that come up from that are usually going to be easier to deal with because your inner world will be healthier. So even if the external difficulty gets higher, because you're living more authentically, because like we would say your chi and everything is flowing a bit better, you'll be more resilient and able to deal with this.
Yeah.
Up to a point, there are certain circumstances where you speak up and you destroy a relationship or you lose a job or something like that, and that might not be worth it. So, but I think that's very important. Any comments on that before I go on to my next massive note here?
No, I think you got it. Yeah. Carry on.
Thank you.
I know that was a very unnatural moment. But the thing was, I had a tangent that I was going to hop onto, so that's what happened there.
I could feel the tangent in your brain, but for some reason,
I'm going to set a boundary here.
I set it up in a really weird way. I was like, "That's what I think. Do you have any thoughts?"
We're only learning to do this. We're not shifus.
Yes,
yet
we've never spoken to a human being before.
Not with a microphone. Well, usually not with a microphone.
All new to us.
Shut up. Yeah. Don't completely, because this will be a very boring episode. Well, actually, no. It might be fucking brilliant. Just let me talk for a bit. Finally.
Okay.
God.
I'm going to leave my notes here. I'm going to go out for a walk.
Some people do that though. They do like comedian Bill Burry does the podcast on his own. I'll be like, how? Anyway, next point. Go on.
So, the other thing you said there is that fighting is useless unless you have to defend yourself or someone you love. I would argue that there is a role to, and I'm going to call it aggression here. And I'm going to say that if someone is out of line and you turn your righteous aggression on that person, and not in an insecure way, not in a way where you genuinely want to take pleasure in hurting them, but you establish a firm boundary, and it can be in quite a forceful way, I think that actually can benefit that person as well.
Yeah, 100%. I want to just say that is one of those moments where my English is really lacking. Where I actually, what I wanted to say quickly, but this is the problem. You try to say things quickly, you don't have, like in Dutch, I would just say it very quickly, like it has its role.
Yes,
but not all the time. But then that doesn't come out. And this is something I'm really insecure about at the moment, is that it goes, oh, it's not necessary. And it's like, that's not actually what I meant. I meant to say I'm not a psycho who goes out fighting people. Yeah. But no, I 100% agree. I actually think it does have an important role. And I think traditionally, and even traditionally is not a good word, because that harks of patriarchy or something like that. But I actually mean, like, in the pure essence, if such a thing exists, of feminine and masculine, I think the masculine usually is more boundary setting. And I see it in my own family, and I see it in a lot of other people's families, with straight couples. I think actually with gay couples, it can work in a similar way with those roles, but that's a whole different topic. But you see quite a lot that the man will be doing more of the fencing work and sorting out things of how to interact with the outside world, and the mother be more filling the space. See, even something like that, I would be able to express so much better.
No, I hear you. And I will say that, like, I actually love sometimes the clarity of your expression in English that I know there would probably be more nuance in
Yeah.
Dutch, but there's something about that raw cutting to the point.
It's just
when
I'm just very afraid that people get the wrong idea because I'm not expressing myself.
No, but I know
perfectly.
what you're saying, and I think it's. Look, I agree that there are properties to masculinity and femininity that are not universal. You know, I'm not denying that, and I don't believe in polarities. I think the masculine has a bit of feminine, the feminine has, absolutely. So this is not a binary thing, but
I think they're useful concepts.
they're useful concepts. They're imperfect labels, but they're
Yeah.
useful concepts. And if you talk about the masculine and the feminine, like myself and Katie were watching The Searchers. Have you seen that movie? It's sometimes called an anti-Western with John Wayne, and it's about John Wayne's character fought in the American Civil War, and on the losing side, and basically comes to visit his brother and his brother's family, and they get attacked by Comanches, and they take two of the daughters.
Yeah.
Which is something the Comanches used to do, apparently, because they were such a warlike, they were such a warring tribe that they were always on the move, always on horseback, and apparently fertility rates were very, very low. There were a lot of miscarriages and things, so they did actually kidnap kids, to bring them into the tribe. Anyway, this movie has this really iconic opening scene where the woman, John Wayne's sister-in-law, is inside the house, and she walks from inside, and it's dark inside, and then outside is like Monument Valley, Utah, or one of these iconic Western landscapes, and John Wayne is coming in from the outside world to the inside.
Yeah.
And that doorway keeps recurring throughout the film. It's one of the most iconic shots in cinema.
Yeah.
But throughout it, you do see like men venturing out to the outside world and engaging in violence and, breaking into places where they're not meant to be, and then coming home to where women are creating like a safe space. And I suppose, what do you think, Bart? Would it be fair to say that in this very imperfect analogy, like the men are protecting the boundary from the outside, or the women are protecting the boundary from the inside?
Yeah, I think that might be a good way of looking at it. I for me, it always feels more like the men create the space and the women create the content or something. That's kind of the way it feels to me. Is like, it makes me. Yeah, this is all going to be imperfect. Anyway, we'll leave it. We'll accept that. But it even makes me think of like if you see a man living on his own. It's usually not a nice place. But like,
as somebody who has lived on his own for many years, this cuts me deeply.
I know. I was thinking of your. I don't know what your abode was.
Hermitage in Kerry.
No, well, I think I saw like a meme or something yesterday where they were like, "Men don't need a lot." It was like big telly, PlayStation 5, mattress. Thanks, But actually, like so often, like
Yeah, I hear you.
I'm afraid this is going to all be so stereotypical, but it's just like my wife brings in beautiful flowers and does things that I would never think of doing that I really enjoy, and
like Katie creates little displays of things she brings from the out. You're looking around the cabin now.
I was looking if the shelf of scented candles were still there.
The candle graveyard, that's over there.
The candle graveyard is over there.
They were getting out of control.
And also, actually, this is a good point maybe to say, I really like the concepts of masculinity and femininity, but like you say, everyone can really I have clearly very feminine aspects in me as well. So it's nothing about that. It's not about limiting anyone or putting them in any kind of like defined thing. I just like those concepts. But I love scented candles. It's so funny, and I get cheap fucking bad ones as well.
Look what's on the table, Bart.
Yes,
you brought me a scented candle while I had COVID, which was a bit cruel. Couldn't smell a thing, but It's still here on the table.
So funny because I gave it to him and he said, "Is this a mistake?" And I said, "I know you would wish it to be a mistake. It is not a mistake. I got this for you on purpose." And now it's still here fucking 6 months later.
I'll guess because it's only burned on special occasions, Bart.
Oh,
Shin
yes.
Hey.
When you honor the Bart
Yeah,
in your life.
when I'm trying to summon you, Bart.
It's not very hard.
It was lit this morning.
And here I am.
We call upon the spirits of the laver.
The labor, yeah.
But what were we? Yeah, and like so, Katie will like look at all these beautiful touches around the house, and I will spend 45 minutes thinking where to put up a shelf.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I want to be able to reach it with one hand while I'm over here, but then also I don't want to knock my head on it when I turn around. You know.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Exactly.
And that's all good. So that's an interesting thing about boundaries, isn't it? I mean, like, what a definition of a boundary. I think part of it is like it separates the inside from the outside, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I really, when you were talking there before, and then you just cut the whole segment off randomly, I was thinking about that thing of consequences, because I think that is the big part, is having to be able to accept the consequences. And that actually what people maybe get wrong sometimes is that they avoid direct outside world consequences. What's kind of what you were saying. They avoid direct outside world consequences, but take hidden inner consequences,
Yes.
which actually are very severe.
Yeah.
And I think the reason I like being really firm with boundaries is because it really keeps the inside of me much cleaner.
Yes.
And I was talking to a friend this weekend. She visited from Holland, and she was talking about she always plays a pivotal role in any job she does.
Right.
Working in a big opera/theatre kind of space in the Netherlands at the moment, not getting paid enough for it. And like, I wasn't surprised. I knew, like, oh yeah, she's this kind of people pleaser, like I am a bit as well. But really not setting boundaries there and afraid to ask more. And so she is constantly... So every time we do a podcast, a moving van appears. It's an interesting thing. I don't know.
Maybe I lit the wrong candle. I'm sorry about it.
Read this. The moving van.
It says heavy goods vehicles. That's why it smells like diesel.
Oh, that'd be a nice smell for a wee bit. But anyway, she really is basically afraid to ask for the raise, and I really think that is doing a lot more damage than she might expect it to. Because I think actually she's saying, I am not worth more.
Yeah.
And she does everything, is a perfect employee, and I'm like, listen, they would miss you if you were gone. They can probably let go of a couple $100 extra a month. It's a big place. You know, they can probably... But it's also about that thing of having to accept the consequence. Maybe better to give an example of my own life. I had a client who wanted to change their whole pricing policy for everything. And it would just mean that I would earn a lot less, and everyone would. But they were like, no, we're just implementing this system company-wide. Everyone's going to have to go along with it. And I just went, no, I'm not going to, because actually you're making it so that if I do my work quickly, they weren't going to do it on an hourly basis. If I do my work quickly, I'm going to be penalized for quick work. But the thing with that example is, I knew the consequence might be, okay, dude, thanks.
Yeah.
But I also knew that if I went along with it, it would cause me frustration every day. Yeah. I would go, why am I not getting fucking paid? Yeah. So I just go clean cut. Listen, guys, I'd like to get paid the same. If that's not an option, thanks very much. I keep it civil, definitely, but just like, that's it. And because they feel I mean that boundary, because I'm willing to accept the consequences, they went, yeah, that's fine. You can keep your old rate.
Yes.
As the only person in the company.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And you know, we were using examples here where the consequences are acceptable. Like if you did lose that contract, it wouldn't have ended you.
No, it would be very dear to me, financially dear, but it would be okay.
But you know, there are situations where the consequences can end people.
Yeah.
There are situations when speaking your truth and establishing a boundary could have dire consequences,
100%.
And then you need to look at these things in another way. So we're not being flippant when we talk about this stuff, I'm a devil for this. Like I will talk about a concept, and then oftentimes in my head I'm like, okay, establishing boundaries makes you a healthier inner world and makes you more able to deal with the difficulties of the outer world. And I'm like, does that apply to warfare? Does that apply to somebody, like a single mum raising a special needs kid? Does that apply to, minorities and endangered situations and stuff like that? And sometimes these things are scalable to a degree and no further.
Well, I think they probably still apply, but it's just a different. You just always are going to have to see about that balance. I think I watched an interview with Tom Hanks once where he said he didn't want to play sort of nice boys anymore. He wanted to play men. And he said playing a man means that you're playing a character who's confronted with choices where none of them are good.
Yeah.
And it's just going to be like, you pick the one and you die on that hill.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. So I actually think it is always applicable, but sometimes like we all choose not to say certain things or not to do certain things.
Sure.
I just think that a lot of people actually do it far too early in the process. They stop. Like if you're not going to ask for a bit of extra money, it's going to eat you up.
Yeah.
But obviously, like there's opinions I hold that I'm not going to be putting on Instagram or something. Not because they're so terrible, but just because especially these days, when there will be 50% agreeing and 50% disagreeing on certain things, you're like, that's not worth all that consequence to me.
No, for sure. And it reminds you of something Chomsky said. I think he was invited on one of the old school, very popular talk shows. Is Nightline? Is that a thing? I can't remember.
To ring a bell, I don't know.
It's some highbrow talk show wanted Chomsky on, and Chomsky said no. Excuse me. And the host said why, and Chomsky was like, "Your show, no, sorry, the show wouldn't have Chomsky on. That's what it was." And Chomsky was like, "Why not?" And they were like, "You lack concision." And basically, because this was an American show, there were ad breaks every 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So if somebody asked Chomsky, this is the example he gave, is Iran a terrorist nation? You can say yes. You can explain that in 5 minutes. Yeah. But he's like, but then if I say America's a terrorist nation, I need more than 5 minutes to back up that statement, And so certain media are not appropriate for that. So we're not going to get into that, but just that, like, I get you. You don't always want to put everything out on Instagram or what do
look at the moment. While we're recording this, the Julian Assange trial is going on. Which if he loses, he's going to be extradited and probably in prison forever. Yeah, and he did nothing but reveal truths. Mm-hmm. But the consequence he's paying, I'm not going to pay that consequence. Yeah, like. And it's also one of those things like, is speaking the truth good? Mm-hmm. Yes, I think he's very brave. Mm-hmm. That's very hard, though. He has 2 small children. How does that work? Yeah, there's a good chance they might grow up without him. Now, in a just world, that wouldn't be the case, but we live in this one. Yeah, and I fair feckin' play to him. Yeah, but it's not that easy. Like it's hard choices, and you have to choose on which one are you like, yes, that's something I'm willing, and I think it's an interesting one, like what you put out in, for instance, social media or something, but those should be the things that you're like, this is a hill I am willing to die on, even if it's not always that serious. But like you put out stuff about Chinese medicine, which you know a lot about, and you're like. You probably don't even have to think about it because it's not that controversial, but sometimes you do.
Oh, it's controversial enough.
Sorry, I know. I'm not diminishing that. I just mean like the content in itself doesn't have to be controversial. Yeah. I think you get what I'm saying.
There's ways to take the edges off.
But it is like, but certain things you just have to go. Yeah. For instance, that thing you just said about the yes or no, is Iran a terrorist state or something. Yeah. That drives me insane. And I will go on record and I will always say that if you were asking a yes or no question to someone about a complicated topic, you are an arsehole.
Yeah.
I hate it. And they do it in fucking Parliament.
Yeah.
They go, no, I asked you yes or no. Well, actually, the thing is, no, I asked you yes or no. You are a terrible person.
Yeah.
In this moment.
To borrow another Chomsky quote, he's like, people say there's two sides to every issue. I think he was also talking about American media where they try to present two sides. He's like, there aren't two sides to every issue. Some issues have one side. Some issues have 10 sides.
Yeah.
You know, it's really true, you know?
100%.
Yeah.
But it is. I think that we need to accept some consequences, and when people feel that you're willing to accept some consequences, that does put you. It's helpful, I think, and it's kind of what you said about the role of a positive role for aggression. I think it's like that thing that Shifu said to me about carrying your sword in your back. I think actually I heard a reading of the Bible. I've never really read the Bible. But about what's that thing? The meek will inherit the earth or something. And I always thought that meant weak people will get everything. And then I heard a reading where someone said, no, actually, it's a mistranslation of basically the person who has a sword but keeps it in its sheath on purpose as much as they can.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that makes sense. So people who have strength but don't just use it willy-nilly. So, oh, that makes sense. They will inherit the earth. Yeah. But
and you know, talking about aggression and having a sword sheathed and not having to use it, and I'm probably going to put a target on my back now. I'm going to jinx myself by saying this, but like I was getting I was getting hassled a lot. I grew up in Tralee, and there was like every time I went out, I had long hair, and people would think I was selling drugs, which I was not, but they thought I would either have weed on me or that I would have the money from selling weed on me. So every time I went out, like literally twice a week, I would get hassled, I would get pushed up against walls and shaken down. So I started training martial arts, and as soon as I started training, like before I had any level of capability, but like as soon as I started training, I stopped having 90% of the hassle I was having. And it is really interesting. It's like, walk quietly and carry a large stick, have the sword sheathed on your back.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to, you know, when people ask about martial arts, you know, you often hear about self-defense. I'm like, if you're genuinely worried about your life, buy a taser. Like, do not rely on martial arts for this. You know, if you're really in danger. What martial arts do, in my opinion, is if you're in a difficult situation and your back's against the wall, instead of not being able to do anything, you'll be able to do something.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's all you can really rely on them to do. But it does train you how to move. Like if you start to feel somebody's aggression coming towards you, if you've never felt that before, it can be really... Like, I wonder how many people listening to this have ever had somebody come towards them with real violent intention, because that really feels like something, you know? And like the first time you feel that is really frightening, you know? Yeah. But that's the world, that happens, you know? And I think it's, particularly for men, it's important to be able to deal with that. So martial arts lets you deal with it. You know, I'm a small guy. I was usually sparring with guys much bigger, much stronger than me, you know? And you just get used to it.
Yeah.
And then when it crops up outside of the gym, you might not necessarily be able to like put two lads on their arse if they start throwing fists, but you're not going to have that terror anymore. Yeah. You're going to be balanced. Agency. You're going to, you know, and that is felt. And to be honest, like most bullies, the people that are trying to push your boundaries, like that's where the boundary starts actually. Not when you start throwing hands. It's when they will test the boundary a little bit, nudge off you or something like that, or make a comment. And then if you establish your boundary then, obviously more in a non-physical way, like in your posture, in your words or something like that, that can often be enough, you know?
I think that's a very good example. And I think like that clearly gives you agency, and like you say, it gives you something to do. And wouldn't we all kind of rather, even if we're going down, rather go down fighting than impotent.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not the right word either. I'm not talking
No, I
about
think
erectile
that's-
dysfunction, it's like I know I made it weird.
Yeah,
I
hard
did
to
it.
fight with an erection.
Listen, lad, I do this. I move the hips and they're slapped around the face.
I'd say it'd work.
Oh yeah, most people would be. Only the real nut jobs would say no, but actually,
Good use of nut job. Go on.
yeah, I know.
so-
Fuck, God, it's a nightmare. Are you sure you don't want to get a native for this stuff? No. I think that's very good, and I think the good thing about that as well is that you can have an appropriate response, because I think the thing that I do, because I actually. Maybe I shouldn't put this out there. I don't really know how to fight. But my thing is when I feel I'm willing to go all in on certain things. And I really noticed it when my first child was born and I was walking with the stroller through the city and there was like hoodlums, young hoodlums, youths, we're so far removed from them now. But just like fucking bad energy and just, and I, for the first time in my life, had this feeling of like, oh, lads. Oh, lads.
Dude, try
please
something.
come at me and I will eat you all because I'm here with my beautiful child.
Yeah.
And so that's a nice thing in a way that it gave me supreme confidence. There was like, it doesn't matter what you guys have.
Yeah.
I am going to fuck you all up because my love is so strong that this body means nothing to me anymore in that situation.
You're fighting for something bigger than
exactly. So that's a nice feeling because it ties to love, but it's obviously not an appropriate response a lot of the time. So I think it's nice
that energy is an appropriate response.
And it's a lovely energy. It really gave me. It's a good. You hear a lot of people talk about this when they get into spirituality or religion sometimes or whatever. It is quite nice to feel small in that way. And it just made me feel like, oh, they can have me.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I think that's that speaks to what you were saying there as well. But I think if you actually know what you're doing, that is a bit more tactical. You can apply it a bit more precisely.
And here's something that I think about a lot. That can go way too far. And I'm speaking for myself that after I learned how to carry myself, that became part of my personality. Was when I was out, I was what you could call boundaried, but not boundaried in a calm, healthy way. Boundaried in an all-encompassing, fuck off the entire world, don't come near me. Yeah. Boundaried in a I'll hit you first before you can hit me kind of way.
Yeah.
And boundaried to the point where it wasn't boundaried, it was closed off.
Yeah.
And then the boundary became part of me.
And you were probably taking up too much space, realistically.
I don't know what I looked like from the outside, but now that I'm aware of it and I'm literally consciously trying to deprogram it, and it's very place related for me as well. It's very much when I go back to Tralee.
You really, like, I've only driven past Tralee, but it always seems, you describe it in a terrible way. Anyone from there, I'm really sorry. It made a real impression on Anthony was treating my daughter Louise, and then he, maybe bleep out her name anyway. But she, you said something. Oh, you have a wooden sword which you used for Tai Chi.
Yeah,
and then you said like it's for movement and and also I came from a place where I had to fight a lot. That really, that she has repeated that to me a couple of times now. Where she's like, oh, I can see in her eyes, she's like, oh, the dark city of Tralee, where people fight you in the streets.
I'm just imagining it's getting like mixed up with Mordor and Louise.
Yeah, well, that's in my head now, yeah.
For my birthday, would you get Louise to draw a picture of what she thinks Tralee looks like?
Yes, we'll have to put that on our socials. That'd be brilliant.
I have a lot of love for Tralee. It's a very unique place, but it's not an easy place. In my opinion, my experience there, other people might have different ones, but I don't. I did not have an easy time there. But yes, yeah, and that becomes then part of my story, and I'm like, in hindsight, like, how true was it? Because like I did start training, and then I started getting left alone, but I continued training. I still train a bit,
and it's always a dynamic as well. Like, definitely, I'm sure I will have a very different experience walking through Tralee than you had then.
Yeah.
But also the circumstances are very different. I wasn't a child there. I was,
Yeah.
But it's always a dynamic. But I really like what you say there, kind of about, if I may put it like that, kind of checking yourself, because I think that is the part of keeping the sword sheathed. Because even the example I just gave about sitting at the back of the room in the concert, and kind of just being pissed off just in myself because I was tired and all that, and then you see a target and you're nearly like, oh lads, let's fucking try it. And then I thought, like, I don't want them to shush me. They didn't shush me because they could feel the fuck off energy. But I did think, like, what if they had? You wouldn't have seriously fought someone over that, would you? That would have been on. That would have been on me.
Yeah, would have been daft.
Yeah, would have been super stupid. So it's you do really have to check yourself.
Yeah, isn't it funny? You need to keep that sword sharp and well cared for, but also sheathed until
really necessary. And
because I was walking around with it in my hand, basically. Is what I was doing. I was like,
you might just cut anyone.
Yeah,
I had. Someone like, and sometimes it does need to happen, like, especially when you connect it to family or kids. I had a bit of trouble with someone who I thought I might run into while I was with my children, and I wanted to set real clear boundaries, but I was afraid this person was not very well and a bit unpredictable, so that's why I wanted to keep them out. And I was talking to a therapist I still go to, that you know as well. And I said to him, like, I'm really afraid because this person is so daft in a certain way, and I have compassion for them as well. Like, I see where it comes from and blah blah. But I was like, I feel very vulnerable as well when I'm with the children because, like I just said, if there's a real problem, there will be a real answer because I love my children and want them to be safe. But if there is just weirdness that I want to keep out of my life, should my children really witness some kind of nasty incident, or I want to shield them from that. And the therapist said, listen, man, make it flow as well as possible, but sometimes if daddy needs to cut off a few heads, the children will understand that as well.
Yeah.
And that was very helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Where, like, there can be people that need to be physically restrained, but you don't want to hurt anyone, like and I think that's kind of dad energy as well. It's knowing how hard to turn up the gas, and you see it with animals too, when you see like an older dog playing with a puppy, knocking them around the place, giving them a few wee nips and stuff, but like keeping it very on a simmer, not letting it get out of control.
It's interesting, isn't it, that there is... Yeah, I suppose that's the thing with boundaries, is that you want to enact them as precisely as possible, but then there's also times where it's just like, hey, you had your shot.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of my wife Yvonne was working on the Lochavala farm in the Burren, beautiful place. We still both help out there sometimes, and we go there all the time. Wonderful farmer and friend of ours, Harry Jochen, brilliant, wise dude. But one of the bulls killed a bullock because the little bullock kept trying to ride the cows. And Bull was like, hey, come on. And come on. And, the bulls are, they're like fucking huge and very male energy, And just like, he got a couple of knocks, cut a couple of knocks, and he was like, right, you're not listening. You're dead.
Yeah.
And it was very like, and it's kind of sad. And then Harry's very good with animals, so he was like, yeah, no, you just have to leave it there for a day because all the animals have to see it.
Really?
Because otherwise they're going to go looking for him.
Yeah.
And then they're actually okay as well. They've seen what happens, but it's like I don't know what that says,
But
it's interesting.
That's the other side of consequence, isn't it? Because we were talking about the consequences to ourselves for enacting a boundary.
Yeah.
Consequences to other people as well. And I think that's that inside-outside thing too, you know, is like you're changing the outside world. When you enact a boundary, you know, boundaries need to be protected and you are affecting the outside world. It's not all about your inner world at all.
No, it has to be both. But I think the problem is that we hide the inner world too much and then don't realize. So, like, we know so many people who have been raised, probably ourselves too, to be kind and thoughtful and a bit self-effacing, and it can be damaging. You know, I think quite often when in childhood things go wrong, people either become externally a problem or internally. You know. I'd say you and I are on the second type, where you're just...
How dare you, I'll fight you.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm not bad. But, a nicer way of maybe looking at it as well is that I think societally people respect when it's done well. When someone... there was this gas story I read about someone being on the City Link to Galway and some guy just being complete arsehole to the bus driver and making trouble and whatever, and one of the passengers gets up and goes, all right, I'm done, get outside, I'll fight you. And then the arsehole steps outside and go, all right, close the doors, we're going. And everyone's like, hey, because that's masterfully done, you know.
Yeah.
But also, like, you have to really good lesson I learned from so we talked about this in a previous episode that might not be aired, but I worked in a pub for a long time, and the people who owned it were like already retirement age, but they always wanted to have a pub, and he really created a place where everyone was welcome. It was great, and the man of the couple was a boxer.
Okay,
he was an old boxer, you know, but he looked like one as well, like big fucking hands and all that. But he was so good. He taught me maybe the most about boundaries that I've ever learned. So it's interesting. It's a martial artist, you know. But one of the things I really remember is when he was showing me, like, he was very good at going, right, when you work here, I'm trusting you with this place. And quite often he wouldn't be there, or we'd have to lock up or whatever. We'd have all the cash there, and, you know, this was before the cashless society. And so he's like, I'm trusting you with this. And the flip side is that you can enact boundaries. People need to be nice to you, and there's going to be no trouble. Yeah. If you set a boundary and someone is angry and goes like, "Oh, I'll talk to Martin, to him, the owner," he's like, "I'll have your back." Like, obviously, if you're an idiot about it, we might have to talk about it. But you can. It's not one of those places where because a lot of places would be the opposite, where you just have to bow down because the owner is like, we don't want to scare away any customers.
Sure.
And he was like, no, you can enact boundaries here. But one of the things that I started doing then when I was young, very young, starting there at 18, 19, was like, if someone was being a dickhead, I was like, okay, here's the boundary, and now you have to leave, and I would escort them out the door, which invariably would result in them trying to fight me because I was putting so much pressure on them and social humiliation.
Yeah.
And he was like, and he showed it to me one time really clearly, there was a guy at the end of the bar making trouble, and he just walked up, he's like, hey man, you really have to go. And gave him the look, you know. And then he walked back into the kitchen, and the guy kind of like, this fucking place, and blah, blah, blah. And then he left. And he said to me, yeah, that's what you need to do, because I gave him the boundary, I told him to go. He knew he really had to go.
Yeah.
Like, the consequence would be severe, but I also gave him a bit of space to vent.
Yeah. Release a bit of
and what
pressure.
you're doing, he was saying to me, Bart, like taking them by the shoulder and leaving them out, that it's just too much.
Yeah.
Far too much.
Yeah.
But then if you do it like that and people go, yeah, nice. It was actually one occasion, so many stories from the pub, but there was one occasion where we were all watching the European Football Championships outside. It would put a telly outside and we'd all be sitting there. And there was a guy making trouble, and he was on drugs or something, because it was, I could just like he kicked something over or something. He was making trouble, and he was being nasty to a few women, and I was like, okay, I wasn't working, but I was sitting there, and I usually work there, so I was like, I got up and tried to deal with it, but his responses were all off.
Right.
You could see he was just he was not really talking to me. There was just something.
Yeah.
And then he didn't know what to do, and he was all paranoid. And then he kind of punched me, but like, it was such a silly thing. It was just like, in my chest, quite soft. And I was just like, God, what do I do with this now? Because it was so not.
Yeah.
I wasn't threatened by it because it was so. He was not on this plane. You know,
yeah.
he probably saw very different things than me.
Yeah.
And I just went, dude, come on, stop it. And he did it again, and I was, dude, seriously. And everyone was kind of looking at me, going,
we're about to watch a
see
man
what
die.
he does now. This is going to be fun. And he did it again, and I just thought, like, the fuck am I to do? So I just like grabbed him, and we fell over. And we were there, and the owner comes out. He goes, Bart, what the fuck are you doing? Are you trying to cuddle with this man? You know? And I was like, I don't know. I know there's guards up the street there. Well, and he was like, I just fucking let him go, and he ran off. It was so funny. But that was another thing where everyone was just like, our big bear, you know. But just like, I didn't know what to fucking do, and it was like some boundary needed to happen, but also I couldn't just knock him in, you know. So funny. I don't know what that story tells, but it was just, it's interesting. People do. I think we're interested in that. Is liminal the right word? Liminal space of a boundary. We're all interested in it.
Yeah.
Saying, what's going to happen here now? And if it's in that case, I think people were like, look at him, the big softy.
Yeah.
It was like they were happy I enacted a boundary.
Yeah.
But they saw I did it very inexpertly, but also without doing any harm. So it was kind of funny.
Well, I think there's different levels of success.
Yeah.
I mean, some people would look at a level of success there as being the guy squares up to you and you knock his teeth out and you're the big man, so you've won. Or the guy squares up.
That would be very like ego heavy then on my part. Yeah,
absolutely. But some people would view that as being success. You've defended your honor and your pride, you know. Or some people would be like, you pull off a badass martial arts move and you throw the guy his ass out in the street. Like, what you did is probably the highest level of success, you know? And it's really interesting, you know?
But I think the big thing in that situation, because I actually want to get back to what you said earlier, is that it's really scary if you see someone has the intent of hurting you.
Yeah.
And in that situation, I just saw that intent actually wasn't there. Like if somebody steps up to glass you, that is a very primal thing that happens then. And that's one of those ones where you get through it, however you successfully or unsuccessfully. And then afterwards, I would have like the fucking shakes. Because the adrenaline is leaving your system, because your body was just like, we've been doing this for a couple 100,000 years. Yeah. When the lion is there, there's no joking around. Yeah, you know, if somebody is actually with intent in their eyes, that's a whole different story. Yeah,
you're acting on completely different systems then.
Yeah.
I have a story, and it's a slightly funny one, and it's a different take on boundaries, and I'm just going to put it out because the other thing about boundaries is that they're artificial, right? Because you were putting an artificial boundary between the inside and the outside. Yeah. It doesn't really exist. You know, they're, again, an imperfect label. They're like a tool we use because we cannot handle a part of the outside world. So we have to keep it out, you know? But it doesn't really exist. That doesn't mean it's not, doesn't mean it isn't very useful and necessary, but there's this old story. It's an old Zen story. And this idea of, there's a guy wandering around Japan, and he's a ronin. Okay, so you know this idea, ronin are kind of romanticized, you know, a lordless samurai, but like put into modern terms. Okay, there's a guy from a military power, whatever superpower you want to think about. He's dressed in camouflage. He's got a Kevlar vest on. He's carrying 2 assault rifles and a bandolier full of grenades, and he's just wandering around the Hinch.
Oh, that's such a good,
such
a good analogy.
You know,
that's such a good analogy.
It's like it's not a nice thing. You know, you don't want a lordless samurai. You do not want an armyless soldier that's armed to the teeth. You know, so this Ronin is wandering around, and he's known for being a lunatic, killing indiscriminately, and nobody can stand against him. So it gets to the point where when a village knows he's on the way, they just flee. They just abandon the place until he's gone. So this happens to this one village, and he wanders through, and he finds a monastery in the village. And there's an old lad there, sweeping, just sweeping the courtyard. And the Ronin goes up to him, draws his sword. He's like, "Don't you know who I am?" The sweeper goes, "Who are you?" He's like, "I'm the Ronin. Like, people are terrified of me. The whole village has fled. I'm the guy that can kill you without even blinking an eye."
Yeah.
And the sweeper goes, "Do you know who I am?" The Ronin says, "Who are you?" He He goes, I'm the guy that can let you.
That's very good. Yeah, that's very good because it speaks to. We always have a choice.
Yeah.
It might be a horrendous one, but we always have a choice.
Yeah, I like that story a lot.
It's a very good story. It actually put me in mind of. I know I've sent this to you before, but I think I just love it so much that I might quote it.
Oh yeah, let's do it. Let's have a quote, man.
Because
I love a quote.
It's a long one, but let me see now. This. So you and I are both big Terry Pratchett fans,
yes.
And this is a bit long. It's like it's
going
to take me
me
2 minutes, but this I always found this really moving, and I think it's about it is about what we're talking about. So this is in one of the books where Terry Pratchett, where Granny Weatherwax is one of the main characters. So how would we describe her? She's like, in Terry Pratchett's world, witches are kind of the earth.
Yeah, they're guardians of the land. They connect with nature. They connect with like small community. They're pillars of the community.
Yeah, they're kind of outsiders in their local community, but everyone goes to them for trouble.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to the wizards, who are kind of basically Egypts a little bit, but they
build a huge institution around themselves.
Yeah, and it's big, and they have a staff with a big knob on the end.
Yeah.
and their power is much more of the stars and fireballs, and the witches are much more of the land and of the herbs and. Anyway, I thought this was beautiful about Granny Weatherwax. Choices. It was always choices. There had been that man down in Spackle, the one that killed those little kids. The people sent for her, and she'd looked at him, and she'd seen the guilt writhing in his head like a red worm. And then she'd taken them to his farm and showed them where to dig. And he'd thrown himself down and asked for her mercy, because he said he'd been drunk, and it had all been done in alcohol. Her words came back to her. She'd said in sobriety ended in hemp. And they dragged him off and hanged him in a hempen rope, and she'd gone to watch because she owed him that much, and he'd cursed, which was unfair because hanging is a clean death, or at least cleaner than the one he'd got if the villagers had dared defy her. And she'd seen the shadow of death come for him, and then behind death came the smaller, brighter figures. And then, in the darkness, the rocking chair creaked as it thundered back and forth. The villagers had said justice had been done, and she'd lost patience and told them to go home then and pray to whatever gods they believed in that it was never done to them. The smug mask of virtue triumphant could be almost as horrible as the face of wickedness revealed. She shuddered at a memory, almost as horrible, but not quite. The odd thing was, quite a lot of villagers had turned up to his funeral, and there had been mutterings from one or two people on the lines of, yes, well, but overall he wasn't such a bad chap. And anyway, maybe she made him say it. And she'd got the dark looks. Supposing there was justice for all, after all. For every unheeded beggar, every harsh word, every neglected duty, every slight, every choice. Because that was the point, wasn't it? You had to choose. You might be right, you might be wrong, but you had to choose, knowing that the rightness or wrongness might never be clear, or even that you were deciding between two sorts of wrong, that there was no right anywhere. And always you did it by yourself. You were the one there, on the edge, watching and listening. Never any tears, never any apology, never any regrets. You saved all that up in a way that could be used when needed.
That's so powerful, man.
That, always when I read that, it gives me either tears or goosebumps. I don't know what it is, but he had such a way of seeing things, and I think that's so beautiful. And I just loved, I don't even need to analyze, but I love that story. I love how there is justice, but then people delight in the justice, and she goes, don't be fucking delighted.
And also the self-sacrificing of the, Granny Weatherwax being the point of the spear, the edge of the knife, the person that decides, that makes the difficult choice. And the idea that communities, people need people like that to make these difficult choices.
Yeah.
but it's almost like you gaze into the abyss and the abyss gazes back into you, or like
100%.
fighting out with monsters lest you yourself become a monster kind of
And
thing.
I think for this time that we're living in as well, I think that line of, well, let me get it right actually.
Virtue
The
unmasked.
virtue,
yeah.
I think, oh, it's so good. Here, the smug mask of virtue triumphant could be almost as horrible as the face of wickedness revealed. That blows my mind. That's so succinct, and that's really something that ticks me off about this time, is people like to go, I'm on the right side of history, and you just want to go, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, it's
Life is
rarely
so
that simple.
complicated, and there is so much pain that makes people act in certain ways, and have a bit of grace about you or something.
And you know, you talk about your boxer friend that ran the bar and stuff.
Yeah.
Like if you ever meet these great fighters, they're usually, you know, calm, quiet people.
Yeah.
Because they're not dealing with the abstraction of this. They're dealing with the reality of it and realizing how ugly it is, however necessary it is. And when you establish a boundary like that or make a difficult choice, yeah, you got to keep ego out of it. You know, if you start relishing in your ability
You
to
really
like
do.
put other, like, you know, you when you were throwing the people out a bit too
too
early without letting them vent. I don't know if
Yeah.
that was an ego thing or not, but like
Inexperience as well.
inexperience, but yeah, this idea of relishing that, of looking for the opportunity to establish a boundary and say, no, you are on the outside, you know, you do this, you do that, to impose your will on someone else. I mean, I suppose that's when you start to impinge on their boundaries, you know?
Exactly, and it's just like, to do a thing, it has something to do with a thing properly. You should you should try and keep your ego out of it as much as possible. I think that's why like I know a few people who were soldiers and who went to war, you know, and they usually come back with a lot of perspective. Like they usually go in sort of excited and looking forward to doing a duty, and they usually come back scarred and but with wisdom as well, or with more wisdom. But I think that's why when you see pictures of I don't know, I think there was, you know, pictures of American soldiers with baseball caps backward and whatever, and you're like, no, I think you need to wear a uniform and be selfless in a way when you're enacting this terrible responsibility. And this is all regardless of what we think of foreign wars and stuff.
No,
like
because
that.
I think
But
you
it's-
can what's it, you know, I think whether a war is right or wrong, I think we can agree that the soldiers are treated pretty fucking terribly.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a separate issue. But I do find it interesting that the people that these superpowers use to impose their will around the world,
Yeah.
the mechanism, the arm by which this is imposed, and the part of the people that are sacrificing life and limb and sanity and health and sleep and joy to do this are treated so horribly as well. Like there's something off there, you know. If it was really a righteous, noble cause, I don't feel like it would look like that.
No, and it's also, when we were talking about boundaries, like there's a lot of other boundaries you can go into, like national boundaries or boundaries between dimensions and worlds. But I think we won't go into those today. But like you said about soldiers, if you believe in the idea of the nation state and you believe that it's worth dying for the nation state, then at the very least the nation state should have your back.
Yeah.
If you are willing to sacrifice everything for it, then you should come home and you should be looked after. And oh man,
Yeah.
they're not.
No.
I think we landed it there on a very
I
low
am-
note, but this was very. I really enjoyed that topic. It was a good topic.
Well, I'm going to draw a strict boundary around the podcast here.
Yeah.
And God help you if you step over it. But that was great, Bart. Thank you.
Lovely to talk to you as always, brother.
Yeah. We don't have a way to end this, do we?
Oh, I thought that was a nice. I think we're just both trying to get the last word in. Is what's happening. Oh, you're putting a boundary around it. Well, fuck you. I'm putting a boundary around it. Time for a song. No.
All right. I'll let you have it. The last word is yours, Bart, and the last word is meow.